you can bring people together more easily around creating energy policy recommendations
Okay.
that will work for everyone.
Mm,
Energy policy, everybody knows we need to have energy policy.
mm,
You frame it not around terms or positions that are already associated with one side. As a facilitator,
mm.
when I use convergent facilitation, it's like, okay, there, let's say this one person says, say that again, coal is best because,
Because we've got plenty of it and it gives us jobs
okay,
and we want to use it.
okay, so then I extract from it what I call the non-controversial essence
Right.
from each of those positions, which is something that everybody would agree is important,
Mm,
or at least not a problem. And that if we're going to come up with a solution that works for everyone, it
mm,
needs to attend to this. So I would never put coal on the list, but I would put two things on the list. We want energy that takes into consideration availability of resources, and we want energy policy that takes into consideration the necessity for enough jobs for people to survive.
mm,
Everyone would agree with this,
mhm,
whether they want green jobs for all or whether they want coal. They would agree to
mhm,
these two principles being necessary for an
mm,
energy policy that is robust, cares for everything, and can move us forward into a future.
mhm.
That is the process. I do not engage people at the level of positions. Now, if you are that person with the coal
Mm,
and these two principles are on the board, you know you're caught. You're already part of the process
mm.
because these two things that are important to you are part of the list of criteria.
Okay.
Then now comes a person, now embody a person who is like frontline community dead set against coal and say
Yeah.
something from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The coal industry, kills our people, and is responsible for lung disease and injuries at your pits, which you don't manage properly. And we hate coal. We don't want it.
Okay. Once again, I'm not going to put coal on the list,
Mm,
but in there, I'm hearing this. We want energy policy that cares for the health of people. We want energy policy that has sufficient safety mechanism in place for
mm,
whatever we do. We want energy policy that is attentive to local communities.
mhm,
The coal person would not say, no, we don't want that.
mm. Yeah.
They might say that's not possible, but we're not looking at this phase. We're not looking at what's possible. We're only looking at what's important.
Mm,
But the thing is that once everybody put their things there, and you don't actually need to hear from every person, it's
uh-huh.
enough to hear all the different
Yes.
needs and criteria, because eventually comes the question, okay, so we heard from a number of people, we haven't heard from everyone, and we're not going to hear from everyone. And I'd like to know if there is anyone who hasn't said anything, or even those who have, that when you look at this list, you see that there's something important to you that's missing, then we
Mm,
want to add it.
mm,
And we also want to see if there's anything here that you haven't said anything about, but you're sitting here and thinking, this doesn't work for me. Both of
mm,
these are important for us to get into. So we work through, we fill in the list, we work through the controversies,
mm,
and we have a list. And then we tell people, all right, guys, soon we're going to go to the next phase, which is coming up with proposals. But at
mm,
this point, uh, given that we have worked out all the controversies here and there's nothing missing,
mm,
can you all agree that if we're going to have a solution that works for the whole, it needs to care for all of these things as best as possible? You all
mm,
agree with that? Yes. You both have a list of rigorous criteria on the type of solution that will be acceptable
mm.
and increase trust.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't have to, quote unquote, hear each other, do trauma work or anything. That is the, now, sometimes it may be that in order for someone to be on the board, either they or someone else needs to go through some process of healing. Then you offline that process.
Mm-hmm.
You do whatever is necessary. But only if it blocks the movement towards understanding what's really important to everyone and putting it on one board. It's not like here is what's important to those who want coal and here's what's important to those who don't want coal, because that keeps it polarized. It's like, here's what is important to all of us together.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of this, you have a group that is ready to steward the list rather than their own private opinions. That's the key.
I can really hear the power of that, and potentially also the speed of it, although I imagine some of the wrangling might take a while.
Not really. Not really.
You would expect to do that, what, in a day, in a few hours?
Depending on how charged the issue is, I wouldn't ever think that it would take more than 2 days.
Mm-hmm. And what about?
I mean, that doesn't yet solve the problem.
Yeah.
There is still a huge amount of work, and in fact, the rest of the work takes much longer. So in my biggest public policy project that I did, that was a real problem with real people. We came up with a list of criteria in 1 day. It was a legislative process, so you also have, session schedules and different things, but it took 2 whole legislative sessions to complete it. So it was ultimately 2.5 years.
Okay, so that part was tiny in comparison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it carries you throughout.